let's talk about this so-called border bill. And it's really a World War III bill. This is really, thank you for dining at the World War III bistro. Your bill is $98 billion. And then they threw in as a 20% tip the so-called border funding. So it's really a war bill. But the U.S. Senate yesterday afternoon unveils a $118 billion bill on border security, aid for Ukraine and Israel. From Reuters. The U.S. Senate on Sunday unveiled a $118 billion bipartisan border security bill that would also provide aid to Ukraine and Israel, but it promptly slammed into opposition from the House of Representatives. Quote, I urge Congress to come together and swiftly pass this bipartisan agreement, President Biden said, also praising the migration measures in the bill, which took months to negotiate. However, House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson declared it dead on arrival if it reaches his chamber. This bill is even worse than we expected and won't come close to ending the border catastrophe the president has created, he said in a statement on X, formerly called Twitter. The Democratic and Republican Senate backers of the wide-ranging U.S. border security and foreign military aid bill pledged to push ahead despite opposition by Donald Trump as well. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he would take steps to hold an initial vote on the bill on Wednesday. If the bill were to become law, it would mark the most significant changes in U.S. immigration and border security in decades. Some progressive Democrats are angry the measure does nothing to provide a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people who have lived in the U.S. for many years, including dreamer immigrants who were brought in as children. Independent Senator Kyrsten Sinema told reporters the legislation would secure the U.S. southern border, including by requiring the Department of Homeland Security to temporarily shut down the frontier to most migrants if there are an average of more than 5,000 crossing attempts per day over 7 days. Talk about creating a massive headache. If there are an average of more than 5,000 crossing attempts per day over a week, then what? These, security measures kick in to temporarily shut it down. Republican Senator James Lankford, one of the negotiators on the bill, said that the border likely would remain closed for at least 3 weeks as the numbers of arriving immigrants drop significantly. In addition to $20.23 billion for the border, listen to this shit. In addition to $20 billion for the border, the bill included $60.06 billion to support Ukraine in its war with Russia, $14.1 billion in security assistance for Israel, $2.44 billion to the U.S. Central Command and the conflict in the Red Sea, and $4.83 billion to support U.S. partners in the Indo-Pacific facing aggression from China, according to figures from Senator Patty Murray, who chairs the Senate's Appropriation Committee. Let's just go right to here.
What are those Chinese doing putting their country in the middle of all our military bases?
Right in the middle of all the military bases. Here's a great graphic representation of the so-called border security bill. Look at this unbelievable bullshit. This is a World War III bill that happens to include 20% for border security. Look at all this. Red Sea conflicts, what's what? Houthis shipping, right? Indo-Pacific, that's Taiwan. Gaza, that's nice. $10 billion in humanitarian aid for Gaza, $14 billion for Israel. That's the Democratic Party for you, right?
Yep.
Compromise.
Yep.
$10 billion for the victims of genocide, $14 billion for the perpetrators of genocide.
I quoted this to Dennis Kucinich because he was talking about how we had to fund Israel, but we also had to fund Gaza. And I quoted Apocalypse Now, where he says it was a way we had over here with living with ourselves. We cut you in half with a machine gun and then give you a Band-Aid. It was a lie. That's exactly what this is.
Of course.
That's what this is. You're gonna pay to kill these people, and then you're gonna pay to keep them fed.
To keep them fed. Unbelievable.
Joke.
Unbelievable.
What a fucking joke.
2.5 to the Red Sea, 4.8 to Taiwan, 10 to Gaza, 14 to Israel, and then $60 billion to Ukraine, and then $20 billion to U.S. border security. So this is not a border bill. This is a World War bill. And of course, it was dead on arrival. And of course, Donald Trump torpedoed it, as he should have. He was right. I mean, it is a political lob ball right down the middle. I don't understand why any Democrat or Republican thought this could possibly pass. They probably didn't. Both Democrats and Republicans probably just want this to run on. They want to run on this issue in November. Biden wants to run on Trump's a racist. He hates the immigrants. Republicans want to run on there's an open border under Biden. That must be it, because the idea that this bill had any chance of passing, even taking Donald Trump out of it, given the polling for Ukraine, given the overwhelming majority of American support for a ceasefire, given the fact that no one wants to go to war with China over Taiwan. I mean, it is unbelievable but border security is a top issue on the minds of almost every voter. It consistently ranks first or second next to inflation.
Yep.
How anybody thought that this bill that's called a border bill, when the border bill is literally 1/6 of the bill, and all the rest of it is foreign war. All the rest of it is world war. How anybody thought this could get through is astounding. Here's Donald Trump. Only a fool or a radical left Democrat would vote for this horrendous border bill, which only gives shutdown authority after 5,000 encounters a day, when we already have the right to close the border now, which must be done. That's the other component. Even Bill Maher called out Joe Biden for this. He said, you don't need a bill to enforce our border. You're the chief executive. You could if you can't do that, what can you do? You don't need a bill for it. It's absurd, which must be done.
Well, there's why I always say you have to look at why are the powers that actually run this country want this massive influx of immigrants over the border, because the idea that a country with a military the size of our military cannot control its border, that's absurd on the face of it.
Of course.
We could close the border tomorrow if we deployed the military to the border. So why aren't they doing it?
There's $100 billion in this bill. This is why it's so politically idiotic. You're sending $100 billion to countries around the world for their wars. And then you're saying, well, we can only close our border after the first 5,000 crossings a day on average for 7 days. Now, I'm not saying we should. And look, I just want to, just take a moment's pause. I haven't looked into the border issue as much as I probably should have, because like our friend Nick Cruz at RBN, I think this border conversation is downstream of a conversation that must be had about why these immigrants come in the first place, which means you want to solve the border crisis, you need to end American empire. You need to stop sanctioning South and Central American countries. You need to stop fucking with their democratic processes, overthrowing their governments, creating all this turmoil. Because most of these immigrants are doing what most of us would do if we were in their situation, right? And so the real question is not what to do when they get here. The real question is, why are they coming in the first place? And if any of these Republicans think they're going to get a much better deal with a shut border than an open border, they have another thing coming to them. Don't think wages are going to skyrocket at first. Although I do have to say, as a caveat to that, I do remember in those early Trump years, we did experience wage increases. We did. We did see wage growth. Now, did that have to do with the border being closed? Perhaps. Or not closed. It wasn't closed, but tighter.
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think it's either or. Yeah. I think if pretty much any country on Earth, what if Canada had this volume of people flooding over its border per day? You don't think they'd have the Mounties down at the border,
of course,
making sure to put an end to that?
Of course.
Go try sneaking into Canada. See how that goes.
Of course.
It's not easy.
No.
So the idea that we don't want this, that corporations that benefit from depressing wages don't want this, that the second labor started getting a little more power, a little more leverage, all of a sudden the fucking border is basically open in a country with the world's largest military by many orders of magnitude. What do we have, an 11 times larger military than the next largest military after us?
Well, this is the other thing. I didn't imagine this. I mentioned this a couple shows back. I didn't imagine this because we covered this on the show. When Biden became president, the facilities at the border were overrun, meaning we were stopping people and detaining people and turning people back. Not only were our facilities, which by the way were called cages under Trump, under Biden they are called detention facilities. Our detention facilities,
now we call them spas.
Right, yeah. Right. Immigration
spas.
Yeah. Exactly. They were full. Not only were our facilities full, the Mexican cages or facilities were full to the point where you had migrants living on the streets in Mexican cities because They didn't have any place to put them. So it wasn't like the border opened up as soon as Biden got in. No, the coincidental timing of this was as soon as we had that hot labor summer. That's when this started happening.
That's what I'm saying.
Because at first, it seemed like the border was
that.
just as closed under Biden as it was under Trump. Otherwise, those facilities wouldn't have been overflowing, and there wouldn't have been that logjam. And I know I'm not imagining that because we covered it fairly often. Yeah.
Right. It seems like the play here is what AOC tried to push. We have to give them work visas. We have to give them work visas for humanitarian reasons. And all of these libs who don't have the kinds of jobs that migrants are going to be competing for are going to be framing it as a compassion issue. You can see where their compassion is when it impacts them by the way they reacted when they sent migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Right. They had them out of there within 48 hours, maybe 24. Yep. They had them at an army base. It's always the same thing. My favorite book about New York history is called The Bronx is Burning. It's a really in-depth examination of New York in the 70s. And Cuomo was running, I think, against Koch for mayor. This is before Cuomo was governor. And I can't remember which said it. One of them said, these suburban whites are going to have to pay their fair share. And the other one said, yeah, they'll pay their fair share, but they're not going to pay your fair share. So it was just this whole NIMBY thing where they wanted to put them in this neighborhood, but they don't want to put them in that neighborhood. It's always that with the libs. And that's what they're going to try to do with this. Once you have millions of people that they've allowed over the border, then they're going to frame it as a humanitarian issue to give them work visas.
Let's read the rest of this Trump truth bomb here, this truth social tweet, whatever they call it. This bill is a great gift to the Democrats and a death wish for the Republican Party. It takes the horrible job the Democrats have done on immigration and the border, absolves them, and puts it all squarely on the shoulders of Republicans. Don't be stupid. We need a separate border and immigration bill. It should not be tied to foreign aid in any way, shape, or form. The Democrats broke immigration and the border. They should fix it. Make America great again.
MAGA!
Here's the thing. If the Democrats, we know that they are an illegitimate party of just dog shit and two-faced scumbags. But if you were good at politics and you wanted there to be some prayer that this would pass, which once again, I don't think they want it to pass. I think they want the status quo at the border to remain, and they want to run on calling Republicans racist, and the Republicans want to run on calling Democrats open borders, right? But if you wanted to pass this, you would no-brainer take the Israel aid out because you know for certain you could get the Israel aid passed in a separate bill like that, right? So, why would you include that? Why would you dilute this bill? Because all you're doing there is you're making it so incredibly easy to brand this bill as what it is, which is look at this graph. It is absolutely unbelievable that this bill is being pitched as a border bill when it is a World War III bill with the border thrown in as pork to try and get as many Republicans to sign on as possible. But of course they're not going to bite. Of course they're not going to bite because the Republicans hold the cards on the issue. They hold the cards on the issue. Why would they bite this? So here's Mitch McConnell, who is a neocon, who does want the funds for Ukraine, which is why he was happy to have brokered this. Here's him admitting defeat this afternoon.
Most of our members feel that we're not going to be able to make a law here. And if we're not going to be able to make a law, they're reluctant to go forward. There are other parts of this supplemental that are extremely important as well. Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan.
Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan.
We still, in my view, ought to tackle the rest of it because it's important.
Oh, yeah.
Not that the border isn't important, but we can't get an outcome. So that's where I think we ought to head. It's up to Senator Schumer to decide how to repackage this if, in fact, we don't go on to it.
He said, oh, yeah, well, I guess fuck the border, but we have other responsibilities like Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. What decade are you living in that you think that's going to pass muster in today's Republican Party? It's just you're in outer space. You are living in a fantasy world. You thought that was bad. Here's Joe Biden. Listen to this.
Congress to pass this bill. Get it to my desk immediately. But if the bill fails, I want to be absolutely clear about something. The American people are going to know why it failed.
That's what this is all about.
I'll be taking this issue to the country. And the voters are going to know that it's not just a moment, just at the moment, we're going to secure the border and fund these other programs. Trump and the MAGA Republicans said no, because they're afraid of Donald Trump.
Fund these other programs as if he wants to pay for like free school lunch. The other programs are war with China, war with Iran, genocide in Gaza, and then some, aid for the people who are being genocided as a sort of care package.
Slap the Band-Aid on the gunshot wound.
And World War III via Eastern Europe. Those are the programs.
And said no, because they're afraid of Donald Trump. Afraid of Donald Trump. Every day between now and November, the American people are going to know that the only reason the border is not secure is Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican friends. It's time for Republicans in the Congress to show a little courage, to show a little spine.
Listen to this.
To make it clear to the American people that you work for them, not for anyone else.
Work for them? The bill is $100 billion to Taiwan, Israel, and Ukraine. What the fuck are you saying? What world are you living in? What world are you How can you say that to a camera? I know your mind is gone. How does anybody say this to a camera? You have to realize your first responsibility is to the American people. Then why is the bill 83% foreign war aid? I mean, it is just absolutely bizarre.
It's Orwellian. It's Orwellian.
Yeah.
It's just Ministry of Truth, newspeak bullshit, and it's only aimed at the audience that aired that speech, where you clipped it from. MSNBC. That's who it's for. It's for the MSNBC, the New York Times. It's for those fucking zombies.
Yeah.
It's that's who it's for. Those are the only people they're speaking to, because they were able to win the 2020 election on those people, and they're just banking on being able to do it again. They're running the same campaign. Trump is unacceptable. Difference is he's not in the Oval Office wiping his ass with an N95 mask now. Right. So it's going to be harder to make that case, and the polls are showing that.
Please clap.